King Charles finally breaks silence on who really ordered Diana's car crash. What if the truth about Princess Diana's death had been locked away behind the gates of Buckingham Palace for 27 years? And what if tonight the silence was finally breaking? Stay with us, because what King Charles just revealed could rewrite royal history and change everything we thought we knew about that night in Paris. The world remembers August 31st, 1997, as a night of unimaginable tragedy. A crash in the Ponte El Alma tunnel that claimed the life of the people's princess sent shockwaves around the globe. But behind the official reports and the carefully worded statements, whispers of conspiracy refused to die. Questions lingered. Doubts grew louder. And now, nearly 3 decades later, the monarchy faces its greatest reckoning yet. Buckingham Palace secrets begin to unravel. The cobblestones of London gleamed under the autumn moonlight as a figure emerged in the shadows of Buckingham Palace. King Charles III, his face etched with the burden of decades, stepped before the world's cameras. The weight of his crown seemed heavier than ever. But tonight, it wasn't gold and jewels pressing down upon him. It was the crushing weight of truth. For nearly 3 decades, whispers had echoed through the corridors of power. Conspiracy theories had flourished in the darkest corners of the internet. Questions had been asked, only to be met with stony silence from the very institution that should have provided answers. But on this night, everything would change. The king's hands trembled slightly as he approached the podium. Behind him, the palace stood illuminated against the darkness, a fortress of tradition that had guarded its secrets with deadly precision. Tonight, those secrets would begin to spill into the light. King Charles breaks silence after 27 years. When King Charles finally spoke, his words cut through the autumn air like a blade through silk. Gone was the diplomatic language of royal protocols. Gone were the carefully crafted statements designed to reveal nothing. In their place stood a man, a son, a father, a king who, ready to confront the demons that had haunted his family for decades. The truth, he began, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to reveal, has been imprisoned within these walls for far too long. The global audience held its collective breath. Television screens across 6 continents displayed the same image, a monarch breaking every rule of royal discretion. Social media platforms crashed under the weight of simultaneous viewership. News anchors struggled to find adequate words for this historic moment. What came next would forever change how the world viewed the House of Windsor. His revelation was as shocking as it was simple. The conspiracy surrounding Princess Diana's death hadn't come from foreign agents or shadowy organizations. It had emerged from the very heart of the royal establishment itself. The call had come from inside the house. But the events that night weren't just tragic. They were laced with secrets the palace fought to bury. Princess Diana's final hours in Paris. Stay with us, because what we're about to revisit will challenge everything you thought you knew. August 31st, 1997. The City of Light was living up to its name as Princess Diana and Dodi Fayed made their way to the golden glow of Parisian evening. The Ritz Hotel's revolving doors had released them into a world that seemed both magical and menacing. A world where camera flashes burst like lightning and the pursuit of the perfect shot had become a deadly game. Reports suggest that Diana appeared calm that evening, her radiant smile masking whatever concerns might have been weighing on her heart. She had found love again, or so it seemed. Dodi's presence beside her represented possibility, a future free from the suffocating constraints of royal protocol. They moved through the hotel lobby like characters in a fairy tale, unaware that their story was about to take its darkest turn. The Mercedes-Benz S280 waited in the hotel's underground garage, its sleek black exterior reflecting the harsh fluorescent lights. Henri Paul, the deputy head of security at the Ritz, slipped behind the wheel. Later investigations would reveal the tragic truth. His blood alcohol level was 3 times the legal limit. But questions linger. How did an intoxicated man gain access to such a critical role that night? Who made the decision to entrust 2 of the world's most famous individuals to his care? As the vehicle pulled into the Parisian night, a cavalcade of motorcycles followed. The paparazzi, hungry for the shot that would make their careers, gave chase through the winding streets. Their cameras were ready, their engines roaring with predatory intensity. But among them, some witnesses would later claim, were others, individuals whose motivations extended far beyond journalism. The crash in the Pont de El Alma tunnel. The Pont de El Alma tunnel stretched ahead like a concrete throat, ready to swallow its victims whole. At 12:23 a.m., the Mercedes entered that tunnel at a speed that would prove fatal. What happened next unfolded in seconds, but its implications will reverberate for decades. The official story painted a picture of tragic inevitability. Excessive speed, alcohol impairment, and a relentless pursuit of photographers created a perfect storm of disaster. The car struck the 13th pillar with devastating force. Dodi Fayed died instantly. Henri Paul's life ended in the twisted metal. Trevor Rees-Jones, the bodyguard, survived with life-altering injuries. And Diana, the people's princess, the woman who had touched hearts across the globe, clung to life for precious hours before succumbing to her injuries at Piti-Salpêtrière Hospital. But even as the world mourned, questions began to surface like bubbles from the depths of a dark pond. But the unanswered questions were about to spark decades of suspicion. Questions the palace never wanted asked. Unanswered questions that sparked global suspicion. Why had the ambulance taken so long to reach the hospital? Over an hour for a journey that should have required 20 minutes. Official explanations spoke of necessary medical procedures, but many found these answers unsatisfyingly convenient. Eyewitnesses reported seeing bright flashes in the tunnel. Not the familiar burst of paparazzi cameras, but something more intense, more blinding. Some described a white Fiat Uno that appeared to clip the Mercedes before vanishing into the Paris night. Paint traces were found on the wreckage, but the vehicle itself was never located. The royal family's response only deepened suspicions. Their silence in those crucial first hours seemed deafening to a world desperate for leadership and compassion. When they finally spoke, their words felt measured, calculated, as if every syllable had been weighed by committees before being released to the public. Diana had been more than a princess in her final years. She had become a voice for the voiceless, a champion of causes that made the establishment uncomfortable. Her campaign against landmines had challenged powerful arms dealers. Her embrace of AIDS patients had shattered social taboos. Her very presence in the royal family had forced an ancient institution to confront modernity. Many believed she had become dangerous, not to the nation, but to those who profited from the status quo. The investigation that revealed nothing. 2 official investigations, one French, one British, reached the same conclusion. Tragic accident. Operation Paget, led by former Metropolitan Police Commissioner Lord Stevens, examined every conspiracy theory, every witness statement, every piece of physical evidence. Their 832-page report dismissed claims of assassination, finding no credible evidence of a plot. Yet inconsistencies remain like splinters beneath the skin. The paparazzi photographers, arrested at the scene, were later released without charges. Security cameras in the tunnel had malfunctioned that night, a technical failure that seemed impossibly convenient. Radio communications from emergency services contained unexplained gaps. Most troubling of all were the revelations about Diana's state of mind in her final weeks. Phone conversations with friends suggested she felt increasingly paranoid, convinced that someone was planning her demise. She had reportedly written a letter claiming that Charles is planning an accident in my car, brake failure, and serious head injury. Was this the desperate imagination of a woman under intense pressure, or the prophetic warning of someone who had glimpsed her own fate? Yet, what investigators didn't reveal spoke louder than their official reports. And what came next only deepened the mystery, the silence that spoke volumes. What comes next may surprise you. For 27 years, the palace maintained its position with unwavering consistency. Accident, tragedy, move on, nothing to see here. The message was clear. The official truth was the only truth that mattered, and further questions were not only unwelcome, they were potentially dangerous. But silence has a way of becoming its own form of communication. Every no comment felt like a confession. Every deflected question seemed to hide another secret. The very intensity of the palace's desire to close the book on Diana's death only intensified public curiosity about what might be written on its hidden pages. Meanwhile, new voices began to emerge. Former royal protection officers spoke anonymously to journalists, describing an atmosphere of paranoia and surveillance. Intelligence sources leaked fragments of information, painting pictures of operations that officially never existed. Documentary filmmakers uncovered witness testimonies that had never been included in official reports. Each revelation was small, incomplete, often impossible to verify, but together, they formed a mosaic of doubt, a pattern that suggested the truth might be far more complex and disturbing than anyone had dared imagine. The inner circle's dark secrets. King Charles's recent revelation struck at the heart of these suspicions. The threat, he suggested, had not come from foreign enemies or rogue paparazzi. It had emerged from within the royal household itself, from the circle of advisors, family members, and security personnel who had unprecedented access to monarchy's most sensitive information. This inner circle operated in shadows that were deeper than any tunnel. Palace courtiers, some of whom had served the crown for decades, moved through the corridors of power with the confidence of those who believed themselves untouchable. Private secretaries controlled access to the royal family with the precision of military gatekeepers. Security officials possessed knowledge that could topple governments or destroy lives. Among these individuals, loyalty was assumed but never guaranteed. Ambition lurked beneath every bow and curtsy. Personal grievances festered in the rarefied atmosphere of royal service. Some, perhaps, had grown tired of watching Diana challenge traditions they had spent lifetimes protecting. The king's words implied that someone within this privileged circle had crossed an unthinkable line, had moved from passive resentment to active malice. The crown's darkest hour. The implications of Charles's revelation sent shockwaves through an institution built on the foundation of unquestioning trust. If the monarchy could not protect its own members from internal threats, how could it claim to protect the nation? If royal advisors could orchestrate the death of a princess, what other secrets might be hidden within the palace walls? Speculation ran wild through the corridors of Westminster and the offices of Fleet Street. Names were whispered in private conversations. Senior courtiers who had clashed with Diana, intelligence officers who had viewed her activism as a national security threat, family members who had never forgiven her for the chaos she had brought to their ordered world. But speculation was not evidence, and whispers were not proof. The palace's official response remained as impenetrable as ever. No comment, no confirmation, no denial. The institution that had survived civil wars, world wars, and constitutional crises would not be broken by mere accusations. Yet something had fundamentally changed. The aura of respectability that had surrounded the royal household for generations had been shattered. The crown, once a symbol of stability and continuity, now appeared vulnerable, perhaps even complicit in its own internal corruption. A king's promise of truth. In the face of mounting pressure, King Charles made a promise that shocked even his closest advisors. Complete transparency. The palace archives, sealed for decades, will be open to independent investigators. Royal protection files, classified at the highest levels, would be declassified and examined. Even the most sensitive communications, those between family members, those involving national security, would be subject to scrutiny. This commitment to openness represented a radical departure from royal tradition. For centuries, the monarchy had survived by maintaining mystery, by keeping its internal workings hidden from public view. The mystique of royalty depended on distance, on the careful cultivation of an image that was more symbol than human reality. But the old ways were failing. In an age of social media and instant communication, secrets had become increasingly difficult to maintain. Public trust, once granted automatically to royal institutions, now had to be earned through demonstrated transparency and accountability. The king's promise suggested a monarchy in transition, an ancient institution struggling to find its place in a modern world that demanded answers, not just ceremony. The investigation begins. Teams of forensic experts, legal investigators, and historical researchers descended upon Buckingham Palace like archaeologists exploring a recently discovered tomb. Rooms that had been sealed for decades were opened. Filing cabinets that had gathered dust for years were examined. Computer systems that had been considered beyond the reach of outside scrutiny were analyzed by digital forensic specialists. What they found painted a picture of an institution far more complex and troubled than its public image suggested. Internal memoranda revealed deep divisions within the royal household about how to handle Diana's increasing independence. Security briefings documented concerns about her associations with individuals deemed potentially subversive. Communications between senior advisors showed a growing frustration with their inability to control her public activities. Most disturbing were the gaps. Periods where routine documentation simply ceased to exist, conversations that were referenced but never recorded, decisions that were made without any apparent paper trail. These absences spoke as loudly as any written evidence, suggesting a level of operational security that extended far beyond normal royal protocols. The investigation also revealed the extent to which Diana had been monitored in her final months. Phone taps, surveillance operations, and intelligence gathering had surrounded her with a web of observation that was both comprehensive and invasive. She had lived her final weeks under a level of scrutiny that would have challenged the sanity of anyone. Global shock and demand for justice. As details of the investigation began to leak into the public sphere, the global response was swift and emotional. Memorial sites in Paris and London were flooded with fresh flowers and handwritten notes. Social media platforms crashed under the weight of millions of people sharing their thoughts, theories, and demands for justice. World leaders, many of whom had remained diplomatically silent about Diana's death for decades, began to speak more openly about the need for truth and accountability. The French government, which had conducted its own investigation in 1997, announced its willingness to reopen its files and cooperate with any new inquiry. Intelligence services across Europe quietly began reviewing their own records from that period, searching for evidence that might have been overlooked or deliberately suppressed. The story had transcended national boundaries and royal protocol. This was no longer just about a British princess or a French car crash. It had become a global symbol of the struggle between power and truth, between institutional secrecy and public accountability. Demonstrations erupted in major cities around the world. Not violent protests, but vigils of remembrance that carried an undertone of demand for justice. People who had never met Diana, who had only known her through television screens and newspaper photographs, felt a personal connection to her story that was both profound and politically powerful. The human cost of royal secrets. Behind the media coverage and political implications lay a more personal tragedy. Prince William and Prince Harry, now grown men with families of their own, were forced to confront the possibility that their mother's death might have been preventable, or worse, deliberately caused by people they had been taught to trust. The psychological impact of such revelations cannot be understated. To lose a parent is tragedy enough. To discover that the parent's death might have been a result of conspiracy or betrayal within the family's own circle adds layers of trauma that no amount of royal privilege can shield against. Queen Consort Camilla found herself in an impossible position, married to a man who was publicly questioning the very institution she had joined, surrounded by scrutiny about her own role in the events that had shaped the royal family's modern history. Her every public appearance was analyzed for signs of guilt, complicity, or knowledge about Diana's fate. The royal family, for all their wealth and privilege, were revealed to be as vulnerable to human emotions, grief, anger, fear, betrayal, as any family facing a crisis that threatened to destroy everything they held dear. The countdown to truth. As this script is being written, the world waits. Investigations continue. Evidence is analyzed. Witness testimonies are evaluated. The full truth about Princess Diana's death remains elusive, but each day brings a possibility of new revelations. King Charles's decision to break decades of silence has opened a door that cannot easily be closed. The questions that have haunted the world for 27 years demand answers. The suspicions that have festered in darkness demand to be brought into the light. What emerges from this investigation may vindicate official accounts, or it may reveal a conspiracy so shocking that it reshapes our understanding of modern royal history. Either way, the monarchy that emerges from this process will be fundamentally different from the one that entered it. The crown may survive, but it will never again be viewed with the same mixture of respect and mystique that once made it seem untouchable. Power without accountability is no longer acceptable in a world that demands transparency from its leaders, a legacy demanding justice. Princess Diana's true legacy may not be her charitable work or her challenge to royal protocol. It may be the way her death and the questions surrounding it has forced an ancient institution to confront the modern world's demand for truth. She was called the people's princess during her lifetime, but she may prove to be the people's catalyst in death. The figure whose story finally broke the monarchy's ability to hide behind tradition and ceremony when faced with demands for justice and accountability. The investigation continues. The world watches. And somewhere in the corridors of Buckingham Palace, those who know the truth about that night in Paris must decide whether to remain silent or to finally speak. The choice they make will echo through history. But even after decades, one question refuses to die, and its answer could rewrite royal history. The question that changes everything. As we reflect on this extraordinary moment in royal history, one question emerges above all others. If Princess Diana's death was not the tragic accident we were told it was, if it was instead the result of deliberate action by those sworn to protect the royal family, what does that say about the institutions we trust with power? The answer to that question will determine not just the future of the British monarchy, but the relationship between power and accountability in democracies around the world. The truth, as King Charles promised, will finally emerge in the shadows where it is hidden for 27 years. And when it does, nothing will ever be the same again. The people's princess deserved truth in life, and she deserves it in death. Do you think the world will ever know what really happened that night in Paris? Share your thoughts below.